Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Who sinned? Wow, what a loaded question. Now, we might be tempted to dismiss it out of hand, saying, well, we know better. Blindness doesn't come from sin. But I think this question points to a deep-seated, very human tendency. We want to think that there's a reason that things happen, that there's a big master plan which one day we'll understand, that especially when bad things happen, there will be a moral at the end of the story, the good guys rewarded, the bad punished. It will all make sense and we can walk away happy. The disciples assume, probably without even realizing they're doing it, that blindness must be punishment for a sin. Why else would some people be born blind when others aren't? It doesn't seem fair, and we want the world to be fair. So it's understandable to want to apply blame for bad things somewhere, even for natural events. Understandable, but wrong, as Jesus tells us, and wrong in two senses. First, it's untrue, and second, it causes a lot of harm. Imagine what a weight that must have been for the blind man and for his parents, the judgment by everyone else that they were sinners. Imagine what a heavy burden that must have been to carry. Even worse, they probably believed themselves that this blindness was punishment for their sin. Imagine the needless shame they must have felt. Now, it's easy to look at this passage and say, well, in olden times when people didn't have science, they didn't understand that blindness could be caused by genetic mutation or by birth defects, and we're much smarter now. True, of course, there have been important scientific advances, and true, as a society, we don't stigmatize blind people or their parents. At least we don't assume them to be sinful. Though even today, when we think we're so advanced, we do continue to stigmatize many people for the way they were born. But I think the deeper issue here goes beyond the conditions of one's birth. For example, I often hear people say, everything happens for a reason, as if this is a very pious sentiment. I don't think it is pious, and frankly, I get a bit upset when I hear that statement, which reminds me of the disciples' question in today's gospel. Both this statement and the disciples' loaded question assume some moral reason for the blindness, something that lets us say he deserves it, that it's his own fault, or at least the fault of his parents. Or conversely, as those who say everything has a reason for happening, they might say, well, I'm sure he's been given some other gifts, or that his blindness has led him to other blessings. Either way, blaming him or assuming he's had other gifts, it lets me off the hook. Why should I help him when it's his own fault, or if he's getting these other gifts anyways? When I hear someone say everything happens for a reason, I usually keep my mouth shut, thinking they're trying to say something nice, but I'm always tempted to ask right back, really? Really? What's the reason for murder, for war, for racism, for sexual abuse? What reason could justify this pandemic? You give me a reason, and I'll tell you pretty quick why it's not good enough. There's no reason we can know. Of course, there's a cause which we can discover through research, and that's extremely important work in helping us prepare, we hope very soon, a vaccine or a cure. But there's no reason in the sense of a purpose. The pandemic isn't here because someone sinned. This isn't God's way of punishing humanity or giving a gift in some very strange disguise. That's what Jesus tells us in today's gospel. Neither the blind man nor his parents sinned. That can sound, again, today like it's obvious, but in fact, I think it's a hard lesson to swallow. It means that there's no way for us as humans to fully understand the purpose of these events. God is not a divine puppet master in a morality play. When people commit evil acts, it is not God who is to blame. Free will is real. For suffering that is not caused by human action, like innate blindness or this pandemic, God is not singling some out for punishment and others for reward. The rain, Jesus tells us elsewhere, falls on the just and unjust alike. It's us, not God, who want to see the rain or the blindness or the pandemic as a moral judgment, as somehow deserved, or as leading us to some better future. It's us, not God, who long for a tidy answer, for an easy moral that comes at the end of the story to explain why everything happened the way it did. I'll let you in on a secret. There is no easy answer. It's not tidy. Why does blindness or disease or a virus fall on the just and unjust alike when it would be so much more satisfying if it fell only on the unjust? There's no answer we can tie up with a bow, though many biblical passages wrestle with these problems, for instance, in the Psalms and in the book of Job. God's ways are mysterious, always surpassing our own understanding. We can't fit them into the tidy boxes that we make, even pious boxes. So where does that leave us? Are we left in despair with nothing to say or do in the face of such immense suffering except that it's somehow part of God's mysterious plan? No. But instead of saying everything happens for a reason and asking what that reason is, I think it's much more helpful to start by saying God is present in every situation and can transform and use every situation, however bleak, for the better. This is our Christian faith. This is the good news that we're called to share, and this is my own deepest held belief. This leads us to ask not why did this happen, a question with no satisfying answer, but where and how? Where is God in this situation that looks so dire? And how is God calling us to participate in the work of transformation? This is what Jesus points to when he says that the works of God are made visible through the blind man. So where is God in the midst of this pandemic? I would say everywhere we look, in the brave healthcare workers putting themselves at risk on behalf of others, in the food service, grocery, pharmacy workers who may earn low wages but are still taking on risk to keep us nourished and healthy, in the people working night and day to find a vaccine or a cure. God is in the opportunity we have to rethink the way we live, to re-examine our priorities. God is in the extra time some of us have to spend with family and friends, to take a nap, to read a book, to pray. God is in our solidarity with and help for those who are most vulnerable. God is here with us in this Mass. This Mass isn't the reason for the pandemic. God didn't make the pandemic happen so we could have this Mass, or so that healthcare workers could prove their bravery, or even in order to lower greenhouse gas emissions and pollution. That would be abhorrent. That would be like a return to human sacrifice, killing off some so that certain good effects could come about. And that is not how God works. But God is present here with us today, helping to create community, to build up our faith, to build up our hope, to bring a moment of joy into a difficult time. And if God is here in these many ways, the next question is, how is God calling me to participate in this work of transformation, of helping God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven? The world is not fair, but we can work to make it more fair, more merciful. That is how we participate in the work of God. I firmly believe that God is calling each of us to respond to these challenges in our own way, to each offer the little we have. I'm in quarantine myself, and I'm no doctor and I'm no nurse, but I am a priest, and today this Mass is the little that I have to offer. My sister had a great suggestion: to keep a COVID-19 gratitude journal each day, to write down the things you're most grateful for. Every day has at least something that's good. However bad things get, God continues to be with us. to love us and will never abandon us. Even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That is why we call the gospel the good news. And filled with that gratitude, we can ask God and ourselves where and how we can best be of service, how we can best love one another. Because however tough the situation, knowing and loving and serving God and one another, that is the reason why we're here.